Hi, Aronra. I don't think you and I have before now spoken, but let's solve that problem. I watched your recent video talking about society and in which you're discussing feminism, and I thought that I would offer your response to some of the bullshit that you said. So, take it away.
Women have traditionally been denied certain jobs, been denied equal pay when they do those jobs, why there are double standards for women's social behavior as opposed to men, and why there is a glass ceiling preventing women and minorities from reaching the upper rungs of the corporate ladder regardless of their qualifications or achievements.
Just as a quick note here, when you say women and minorities, what you're literally saying is the majority of the population and the minority of the population. Happy news for you, sir. Women are, in fact, the majority of the population in the United States. Now, with respect to the upper rungs of the corporate ladder that you claim are denied to women and to minorities, can you please specify what positions they're not allowed to have? There's nothing whatever that stops any woman or any minority, or indeed any man, from starting his or her own company, being the chairman and CEO of it, and populating the ranks of that company with anyone they so choose, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, male, female, whatever. Your complaint is that people who have already started companies aren't giving up their positions to the people you would like to see have them. That's not a glass ceiling. That is to say that the positions that already exist at these levels that are already secure and have high pay are the ones that people are insisting they're entitled to. They're not. They can go be CEOs of their own companies. They don't want to do that work. They want the job that already exists that's easier, which is fine. They're free to apply for it. And the people who have that position are free to say, thank you, no, your throughput is not adequate. We want someone who's going to invest just a lot more time and effort into our company. Just so you know. Carry on.
There is one significant way that racism and sexism are different. There is no word for a non-racist.
That's actually false. It's false several ways. There are several words that mean non-racist. A common one is egalitarian, but carry on with your entirely vacuous diatribe.
There is a word for a non-sexist.
It's not
I've
feminist.
noticed that when I speak about science, I'd better have all my facts straight, or the scientists will jump on me for anything I get wrong. And I can bash religion pretty well and not worry too much about the reactions from the butthurt theists. But if I talk politics, I will immediately irritate a whole lot of people I didn't mean to piss off. And this still isn't as bad as when you say the word that means non-sexist. Once you utter the word feminism,
For those of you who are keeping score, this is what it sounds like when you preach to the converted.
you're stirring the
Can I get a hallelujah? Can I get an amen? Sorry, carry on.
coals of controversy, awakening a hornet's nest of haters, and they will twist whatever I say today into something I never said, never meant, never implied. And I don't
And I won't be doing that. Despite your attempt to poison the well.
know why it is that way, but it has always been that way. Where does this reactionary revulsion come from? Here in our lofty, intellectual, atheist, secular...
Ah, there's one of your problems, thinking of atheists as being lofty and intellectual. There is nothing whatever about rejecting a proposition that at least one God exists that implies to the slightest degree for the remotest period of time that a person is lofty or intellectual, enlightened, or anything.
skeptical communities where we are more tolerant than everyone else because we supposedly understand things better than everyone else.
This just speaks to your biases and your prejudices. I don't for a moment think that atheists are any less stupid than the general population, because they're not. They're just as poorly educated as most people are poorly educated. There's no contradiction between being an atheist and a complete idiot. If you look at the Raelians, atheists, absolute idiots. Atheists, absolute cultists. Atheists believing absolute batshit crazy nonsense. No contradiction. Perfectly consistent.
How
You're talking about what you would like to think as atheists as being, think of atheists as being, rather than evaluating what atheists in fact are. Indeed, if you look at the spectrum, religious people and atheists all score, not all, but generally score less well on tests than agnostics, many of whom reject the label atheist for several reasons.
It be that we would have so many people in our own ranks, including women, who object to feminism. That word has cultural stigmas poisoning it every bit as much as atheists, and nobody should understand that better than atheists. A couple weeks ago on an atheist podcast, someone told me that the reason was there's so many different definitions and that I'm using the wrong one. That just because you're not a feminist doesn't mean that you're a sexist. My friend D.P.R. Jones jumped on that comment like the lawyer that he is.
That's an important fact here. We'll return to it shortly.
And pulled up a half dozen different dictionaries, all of which gave the exact same one and only definition that I use.
Now, I wasn't actually there, so I can't say with certainty that you're wrong, but I'm going to say that you are wrong. That he did not, in fact, do that. But let's hear your definition first.
A feminist is one who advocates equal rights and treatment for women.
Okay, in about 0.8 of a second, I pulled up Google, and then I typed in Merriam-Webster Dictionary and looked up the word that you claim has this one and only definition that you just specified, and I find, right here, organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. Not word one in that definition about equality. It's just advocating for more and more rights that are in line with the interests of women. There is no limiting factor there that restricts it to whether or not it's equal, whether or not it's fair, or anything like that. It's the accumulation of the things specified by the definition. Rights, subsequent to their interests. So it's curious that D.P.R. Jones, Esquire, was able to find 6 dictionaries on the fly that all gave precisely and exactly only the definition you claim is the only extant definition of that word, when I, in under a couple of seconds, can find a definition that is not that. Now, to be sure, doing it in an equal and fair way would be consistent with this definition, but it's by no means entailed by this definition. Doing it in an unfair, unequal way is also consistent with this definition. Anyway, let's get back to you. Oh, by the way, this is why you should take a little bit of a caution when referring to what a lawyer has claimed. A lawyer, a person who is trained to win an argument, whether he's right or wrong, will be aware of different kinds of dictionaries, whether it's a general dictionary or a specialized dictionary, and they will use whichever one is more advantageous to their argument. For those who are keeping track, the distinctions are semasiological and onomasiological. The semasiological one would be the general dictionary, whereas the onomasiological one will be a specialized dictionary. He might not know, and lawyers generally might not know, the names of these different types of dictionaries, but you can be sure they know what they are, that they exist, and they will appeal to whichever is more convenient. Now, a semasiological dictionary is something like the Merriam-Webster's dictionary I pulled up. An onomasiological dictionary would be something like Tabor's Cyclopedic Medical Dictionary, which, if you don't know how it's organized and how the words are constructed, is not going to be useful information for you. For instance, if you looked up the term hepatocholangiojejunectomy, it would mean nothing to you. You read it left to right, but you don't interpret it left to right. With medical terms, procedures in particular, you have to unpack them in reverse. You read them backwards. The Y at the end means pertaining to or relating to. The ostomy is a surgical incision into. Jejune is part of the intestine, so you maybe if you took biology, you're familiar with like the duodenum and the jejunum, it's that part. And then what was angio dealing with vessels, chole dealing with bile, and hepat dealing with the liver. When you put all that together, reading it backwards and looking at what the structure, what's happening to the structures at the endpoints and the intermediate parts, you realize that what it is, it's a decision whereby the liver, the hepatic duct rather, is drained into the jejunum. If you don't know how these dictionaries operate, how medical terminology functions, you will not be able to make use of that because it is so specialized that only people who are expressly trained in it or who happen to have an interest in studying it will be able to even sensibly wrestle with the words in that onomasiological dictionary. Lawyers know this. They may not know the terms, but they know that these things exist and they exploit it. Moreover, Aronra, I know beyond all doubt that you are aware of the distinction because you, like so many other atheists, quite properly in this case, whine and complain about the equivocation that happens with respect to using terms as their theory as it's used in science with a very specialized, particular onomasiological definition versus the general use of the word theory that creationists want to use, the semasiological definition. You too are aware of the distinction between technical definitions and general definitions, and you quite properly point out the logically fallacious reasoning and argumentation on behalf of creationists with respect to their insisting on using a general term when what is actually relevant here is a technical term. My point, in response to you, is that's exactly what's happening here with this concept of feminist and feminism. You're trying to use this very general definition that is inapposite here, inasmuch as feminism has, for better or worse, become an actual academic, and I use that tongue-in-cheek slightly, field. It now has its own particular vocabulary, its own specialized uses of words, and you are either profoundly ignorant of this, or you are willfully misrepresenting the position to the audience who are, in this case, because I'm just going to guess because of where you're finding them, themselves not in a position to understand what it is that you're doing to them. So I don't know whether you're just ignorant or if you're a calculating, dishonest piece of shit. I can't say. I don't know you that well. I'll just pretend, out of charity, that you're stupid.
That's it. That's the only definition there is or ever was.
Except for all those contrary ones, and ones that are different.
Although there is a colloquialism that feminism is the radical idea that women are people too.
Uh-oh. Now I won't get into synecdoche. Can't talk today.
Now, if you look...
Oh, by the way, for any linguists who might be watching, I know there are always problems when mathematicians start talking about linguistics, so I'm going to be saying very non-controversial things like I already did. I'm not going to delve too much into it. I'll leave that quite properly in your capable hands.
The actual definition in the negative, you'll see that a non-feminist is someone who does not advocate gender equality.
Oh, no, but that's not entailed by your definition. It's not necessarily contradictory to the definition that I gave, but it's not entailed by it either. In particular, if you look up gender equality, you'll see that gender equality, also known as sex equality or sexual equality or equality of the genders, implies that men and women should receive equal treatment, ... There's not actually ... there, I'm adding it for dramatic effect. Unless there is a sound biological reason for differential treatment. Like the exclusion of women from certain jobs. For instance, the Navy SEALs. I do not think, I could be wrong here, and I would be very surprised if I were, and I would be very happy if I were, but I don't think that I'm wrong. There does not exist a single woman who has ever, currently exists, or ever will exist, who can successfully complete SEAL training, UDT SEAL training. Don't think it can happen. There is not a woman who has existed, who does exist, or who will exist, who can outcompete the absolute physically strongest men. Will not happen. That alone is a sufficient reason to exclude from certain fields those who can't compete, which happens to be the case that it will include all women and, by the way, almost all men. Almost no men are capable of making it through UDT SEAL training. In the 70-some-odd year history of the SEALs, there has been one and only one man, my height, who has made it through. Not that they're excluded, Just that we, with only one exception so far, aren't strong enough to do it. So I would not have any problem, whatever, with the waiver provision in there, from them generally excluding people my height or shorter from applying to Navy SEALs. And to the extent that someone would like to apply for it, they must first meet a certain set of introductory things to prove that there's at least a chance they can make it through. And if they want to have some system like that for women, knock yourselves out. Now, the Marine Corps has for a couple of years now been experimenting with letting women into their combat arms by letting women go through their officer basic school. So far, 100% of the women who have attempted it have failed out almost immediately, like right from the outset. They just can't do it. And these are athletically inclined women. These are very strong women. Among the segment of the population that you would want to call a woman, these are the top performers. And yet they are nothing like near being able to compete with even slightly above average in physical strength men in the Marine Corps. I would be very happy to see that a single woman could make it through. I would be bowled over if 2 or 3 could. But I don't think it's going to happen. I'm happy to be proved wrong. So what you should do, sir, is go out there and get in this recruitment campaign and get these women who are biologically capable of doing it and send them in there to shut people like me up. The problem is, you can't, because they don't exist. And by the way, that's not sexist. I did not invent the species. I did not devise the sexual dimorphism. It's there. And it is perfectly appropriate for us to notice that one thing is not like the other with respect to a given issue.
That they will accept gender inequality, which is exactly what sexism is, and I'm right again. If you are not a feminist, you are a sexist, by definition.
Oh, well, by your definition, sure. Fortunately, the definitions of words are not contingent on Aronra's permission or his remonstrations before an audience of ill-informed students.
But it's not a dichotomy. If you are sexist to a degree, you are feminist beyond that degree. So to the degree that...
So now you've just proposed that you can simultaneously be a feminist and a sexist. Yet, you earlier proposed that feminism means being not sexist. You're trying to have it, as Hitchens would say, every which way in the most promiscuous way possible. So now you've established a continuum, whereas earlier you had established bright line rules. You should be a preacher. You'd be good at it.
You support equal rights for women. What does that mean? Does that mean that all men are created equal to other men? And that all women are equal to each other, but on a different standard than men? Obviously not. It means that women should be considered equal to men. So it is nothing short of embarrassing for me as a man when men's rights activists chime in saying, equal rights for women? What about equal rights for men?
The thing that you're missing here is that in the conversation, well, I don't need to defend the MRAs, they can stand up for themselves. By the way, I'm not one, but whatever. Is that when in discussing equal rights, there's another component that they tack on that you have conveniently left off. That rights are not standalone things. They come with obligations and responsibilities. The complaint isn't about the advancement of rights. It's about the mitigation of responsibilities while, nevertheless, claiming a right to that right, claiming an entitlement to a particular right. Rights and responsibilities have always been tied together. Always. And they should be. Otherwise, what you have is not... You have a society where it's, we want privileges and privileges. We want to be catered to and to accept none of the obligation that goes along with this type of privilege. It's like dealing with children. Well, why do my parents get to stay up after 9 o'clock? Why don't they have a bedtime? Well, because they also have the obligation to wake themselves up in the morning on their own volition, get you up, get you ready, send you off to school, and then in addition to that, go to work. They have additional obligations that are imposed on them, which they happily accept, and because of that, and because they are meeting their obligation, they're meeting their responsibilities, in a way that's equal to what the responsibility obliges them to do, they have certain extra privileges. If you don't like that, then that's fine. You don't have to take on those obligations. You just don't get to whine and complain that while abdicating all of your responsibilities, that you're also not being given all the entitlements that people who are willingly taking those on enjoy.
What is it about the word equal that they don't understand?
It's nothing about the word equal that they and people like me don't understand. It's that you like to misrepresent what the position is and then pretend as though it's we who are the stupid ones. The fact that you, either through your ignorance or through willful misrepresentation, choose to set before people an argument that does not do justice to what you're being presented with, doesn't actually make me an idiot. And it doesn't actually make the MRAs dishonest, and it doesn't make them failing in a position where they're failing to appreciate what the word equal means. They're just not artificially cabining it to only one part of the equation, like you insist needs to be done.
It seems as if they're trying to be more equal than women.
More equal. You mean by like the way feminists advocate for rights while abdicating the responsibilities that attend those rights. Are we having an Orwell moment here? We're all equal, just in different brackets.
It sounds to me like they're trying to secure supremacy. And if they really wanted equal rights, like they say, they would be feminists. And if women are not satisfied with equality and are actually pushing for dominance over men as they allege, those women would not be feminists.
Well, that's fine. You're a purist. You want the word to be unadulterated. That's fine. The only problem that you have is that what you would like to propose as being feminism is not consistent with the way that the academic and the majority of feminists I run into understand the term to be. So there seems to be a disconnect between what you propose it means and the way they act. So here's what I propose you do, sir, as a man. You go tell all these feminist women what it means to really be a feminist, and then you get back to me. All right, sport? That'll be great to see. Get it on tape if you could.
Now, I've heard people object to feminism on the excuse that some feminists have gone too far. Whatever the hell that means.
I'll give you an example. Since you brought up DPR Jones, I will retreat to the law, the criminal law in particular. I recently did a video talking about how feminists are getting their way with respect to criminal prosecutions as it regards the crime of rape, namely in making it a strict liability offense, which is to say that it's an offense for which you can be convicted even if you accidentally do something. Prof MTH stupidly came back and said to me, no, that's not true, it's not happening, it's a general intent crime, you don't know what you're talking about. Prof MTH might well be a lawyer, but he's fucking retarded. He doesn't understand what's happening. He's refusing to accept the case law as it's developing. This is what it looks like when someone is beholden to their ideology and unable to see what's actually happening. I brought up a case where a man in this state, in Washington State, was convicted of rape, second-degree rape, and during the trial, the prosecutor argued to the judge, hey, judge, he can't just say he's not guilty and expect me to prove that he is. No, we won't be having that. He has to affirmatively get up and prove to this jury an affirmative defense that he says he doesn't want to prove. He can't just say not guilty and leave it there. God, that would be hard for me. And the judge at first was like, well, that doesn't sound reasonable, but whatever, I'll grant. Sure, he has to now put on an affirmative defense and convince the jury that he has a good reason for having raped this woman. In other words, to this type of affirmative defense, you have to pretty much concede that you did all of the bad things the prosecution said you did. You have to plead guilty and then convince the jury that you have a really good reason for doing all the things. So even though you're guilty in one sense, you have an adequate justification that says the jury should excuse you from culpability for that crime. And he was convicted. And it went up to an appeals court, and the appeals court says, oh yeah, he can't just sit there and plead not guilty. We won't be having that shit in Washington State. No, you got accused of rape, sir. You need to do more than just say you didn't do it. And on discretionary review, it went up to the state Supreme Court, which took 13 or 14 months of debate to finally return a divided opinion saying, no, he's entitled to a new trial. The defendant has an absolute right to say, I'm not guilty. The state has to meet its burden. It took them more than a year to resolve the question of whether or not a defendant has an obligation that he can be forced to prove to a jury he's innocent. Prof. MTH says, oh, no. General intent. Well, I was doing some more research on it. A lady. This is the wonderful part about feminism and how it hurts everybody. Feminists are getting their way. A woman was raped in her sleep. Her assailant, a 15 or 14-year-old boy, broke into her house, raped her while she was unconscious, and the beauty of it is, she's in prison for raping him, because statutory rape is a strict liability offense. So it went like this. If he's convicted, he would be guilty of second-degree rape for attacking someone while they're not able to resist. She's also guilty of rape for having been asleep when the guy broke into her house and started raping her. She's in prison, he's not, because he's a kid. He got whatever it was, and he is going to be out on the streets while she is languishing in jail for years. The appeals court says, nope, this is a strict liability offense. Rape is strict liability. First degree, second degree, third degree, first degree rape of a child, second degree rape of a child, third degree rape of a child, strict liability, no intent is necessary. She has an affirmative obligation to argue not only that she was asleep, but that she was asleep because she had been rendered by someone else unconscious. In other words, it could be the case that as her normal routine, she takes some sleeping pills to go to sleep, and if you're a rapist and you know that, you can break into her house and rape her. And if you're underage, she's guilty of the crime because she voluntarily took her nighttime drugs. This is a wonderful paradigm. So this woman, who, if you take her facts as true, which I don't know if they are, but just take them as true for a moment, she was asleep, and she wakes up to being brutally raped. She goes to prison. The rapist, not really. This is an absolutely delightful bitch slap in the face of society that feminism and feminist reasoning has brought about. Don't you ever try to tell the lie that feminism is about the advancement of women's rights and interests in some equal kind of sense. No, it's not. This is about dominating a field and saying that what we want will be the law of the land and it will rule everyone, and we don't care who is hurt in the process. So I don't know if this woman, maybe it was one of those I was asleep, wink, nod kind of things. Maybe not. The point is, it's now the state of the law, in my state and a couple of others, where you can, through all the goodwill in the world, be the most perfectly moral person, be brutally ravaged in your sleep by someone else, and you can be imprisoned for the crime. When it was come about, the reason it came about is because feminists were noticing, God, it's kind of hard to get some rape convictions because you have to prove like this intent element. And intent's not always easy to prove. Not enough people who are being charged with rape are being convicted. We got to solve this. I know. Let's get rid of that whole pesky intent component. Well, they're succeeding. And we're seeing the consequences. So enjoy it, ladies. Don't take any sleeping pills, and because if there's a minor around, a 15-year-old who wants to break in your house and fuck you while you're unconscious, your ass is going to the hoosegow, not him.
And rather than query them on how they quantify that, or even try to qualify that, let me just agree up front. Yeah, some feminists have gone too far. Accepting that as a fact, let me ask those people, does that justify the perpetuation of a sexist culture? I think not.
No, it doesn't, which is precisely why people like me oppose the majority of feminism that we see taking place in society. Not because we're opposed to equality. Well, actually, that is why we argue against it, because we're opposed to their version of equality. By equality, we mean, like equal standing before the law, and equal ability to persuade people that you're correct, and not being disfavored simply for existing, with no guarantee that you'll always get the outcome you want, because there are other people who have rights, and sometimes Sometimes they come in conflict, and just because it's a man and a woman whose rights are in contest doesn't mean that the woman should by default win. Those kinds of things. So it's because we actually want equality before the law. Not, by the way, equality with respect to abilities, because anyone who tells you that we're not a sexually dimorphic species, radical feminists, and they claim that a woman can do physically everything a man can do, and more, to include giving birth, is lying. It's simply not true. Women are not as physically strong as men. The top performers of women will never ever compete at an equal footing with the top performers of men. It is true that some women are stronger than some men. It's also true most women are physically weaker than almost all men. I didn't devise the system. It's what nature bequeathed us. And you ignore it at your own peril.
And people tell me that it's sexist just to say that gender equality should be called feminism. Why not call it humanism? Because humanism already means something else.
It's funny that you keep getting laughs from these people who are stupid. Humanism, any system or mode of thought or action in which human interests, values, and dignity are taken to be of primary importance, as in moral judgments. A society that is not one of equality is one that does not take adequate account of the dignity of the people who are being treated unequally, and it is not moral. Humanism fully deals with the issue you claim that it doesn't. Right there in the definition. And by the way, I'm not using any of the technical, specialized definitions. I'm using common dictionaries. Which, how you can be ignorant of these definitions beggars my imagination. Either you don't do your research, in which case you're inept, or you do your research, in which case you know this and you say otherwise, which makes you a lying douchebag who will tell whatever little lies he needs to tell to protect his ideology. Kind of like lying for Jesus. You have a great day there, pumpkin.